Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 226. Today I'm going to talk about Bioshock Infinite. This is a board game from Plaid Hat Games and basically based off of the video game. However, you're not playing the protagonist in the board game, you're playing the bad guys. So there's two factions that you're going to play, Vox Populi and the Founders. And the game plays 2 or 4 players. Basically it's a head-to-head game, but you can play it as teams if you want. And it's basically sort of like your dudes on a map battle game, kind of like Risk or something if you're not familiar with board games. Not really like Risk though, way better. And you basically are controlling these different factions, trying to dominate control over the Cloud City area, and trying to also deal with the protagonist. So the character that you would play in the video game is actually the character kind of harassing and just being a general thorn in each of the factions' sides. So that's kind of an interesting take on the game. So let me jump into how the game works and I'll come back and tell you what I think. Okay, I've got the board here set up how it might look at the beginning of the game. You can see we've got the founder units here. These are the blue units. Here you can see an example of one of the leaders here. This is the Songbird unit. Now what's interesting about the game is the bases of the units actually kind of indicate what type of unit they are. So these little common units here, you can see they have a little square base. The leader units have a star, and then each side's got some handymen here, and you can see the detail there on those. These are actually pretty small, but there's a lot of detail on them. And then these have a round base there. Each team comes with different structures you can get. You can see here's a stronghold in blue, and then we've got here a turret, and then we've also got a triangular alarm system here with this little whistle. It's kind of neat. So each team has that. Now you can notice that there's 2 different colors of blue and red here. So you've got sort of darker red and lighter red, and then we've got the same unit here, the same common unit, but with a dark red and dark blue and light blue. This is for when you're playing with teams. So when you're playing just 2-player, you just mix all the colors together. But if you're playing 2-player, then one side will take care of the dark colored side, and then the other side will take care of the light colored side. And also, when you play with teams, you'll have 2 decks of cards. You see a light blue and a dark blue. When you're playing just 2-player, somebody takes one of these decks. And these cards you're going to be using a lot in the game. They've got a few different purposes. They're going to do different things depending on what phase of the game it is. So you can see some different values here and some special abilities that you actually have to unlock as the game progresses, which is pretty interesting. So everybody's going to take a deck of these. You're going to draw 5 cards. And then each team has a set of 4 leaders that you could. The game says to deal them out randomly, but I couldn't see why you couldn't just choose them and just kind of figure out which one you want to play with and kind of tailor your strategy. Because each leader has a little sort of bonus that you can do like throughout the game. So like this guy, structures you control add 1 additional white die to combat, or this one is units cost you 1 less silver eagle. That's the money in the game. You can see that over here. And so you can just kind of pick and choose your sort of little special bonus that you get throughout the whole game. Now what you're trying to basically do is get control of these different territories. So if we take a look down here, we can zoom in and you can see these territories are broken into these sort of haloed lines here. So you've got Garden of New Eden. This is where the Founders will start off in one of these areas here. And then you've got Hall of Heroes. Now each of these areas here is broken down into a territory. So you can see this is Territory D, consists of Area 9 and Area 10. So that's Garden of New Eden, which we saw up here. And then we've got Area 10 here, Comstock Center. So if you control an entire territory, basically controlling both areas listed here, you can take and put a victory point marker on that spot. So for example, if the blue player came down here and then took control of Area 10, you can throw this out here, and then basically you've got a victory point. You have to control everything in there. So if the red player come along here and knocked you out of this area, then you'd have to remove that. And then if the red player ended up taking over both spots, then they would put their victory point marker on here. Now this is just one of the ways you score victory points. I'll talk about some of the other ways here in a minute, but this is really the key of the game, is not only controlling areas for victory points, but some of the other victory conditions and things will basically be based off having control of the board. So let's walk quickly through all the phases of the turn. I'm not going to do a super exhaustive walk through the rules. If you go to Watch It Played's channel or even go to the Plaid Hat homepage, there's a link to a very exhaustive, basically complete translation of the rulebook into video form, done by the Watch It Played folks, and that's excellent. And that's actually how I learned to play the game. So, I did, go through the rulebook and everything is very clear. Now, the first thing that's going to happen every turn is we're going to flip over one of these sort of event cards here, and we're actually going to have a vote. So there's going to be different, outcomes of the vote described on the card here, and players are going to actually have to play cards to determine the outcome. So it kind of tells you whether or not you'd be in favor or against. So this one says founders receive 10 silver eagles to split evenly among all founder players. And obviously the founder player would really like that, and the Vox Populi player would not. And so there's just a different, little events here and things that'll happen. Now, the way that you vote is you use your cards here. So all the cards, again, have this sort of structure with a combat value, sort of a voting influence value, and then some money generation, and then obviously some different effects. So you're going to take and play these cards at different moments. So at this point, starting with the start player, you're going to take and put a certain number of cards face down, and then you're going to add everybody's cards influence to the voting. And then depending on, whether you're trying to pass the law or defeat the law, then, whoever does that wins. Now, whoever actually puts the most influence in is going to also grab here the first player marker, and this is going to be pretty important. I'll talk about more of this in a second. But unless the players are tied in victory points, then the Booker character, and you can see here, I didn't show you these yet, the Booker character is shown by this little model here, and then you've got the Elizabeth model there. Now, if the players are not tied in victory points, then the Booker character is going to effectively roll the die. So they're going to roll the die and then add their total in favor of the team that is currently losing the game. So it's sort of a little bit of a catch-up mechanism, so that it kind of prevents a runaway leader in this case, or at least tries to. So they're going to roll this die, you're going to add it to whoever has least victory points, and then you're going to see if this passed or not. After that, you're going to take a look at the bottom of the card here, and these different things are going to actually control Booker and Elizabeth's action in the game. So this will tell you where they're going, Booker's going to go. This is going to tell you whether or not to activate Elizabeth, and this is going to show you whether or not Booker is going to be aggressive if he ends up in an area, with the players. Now, Elizabeth is actually pretty interesting. So you've got here 3 timelines in the game, and so the first time that the Elizabeth card is pulled, or a card is pulled with Elizabeth here, depicted on the bottom, you're actually going to have this little marker on the card. And then this is going to move down, and it's going to tell you what Elizabeth is going to do, or what Booker's going to do here. And so these things here will actually sort of sometimes drive the game to make it end quicker. It's going to mess with, the red player a little bit, and then a little bit later it'll end up messing with the blue player. So these are kind of thorns in your side as you're trying to, accomplish some different victory conditions and get area control. So after doing the world event phase, doing the vote, moving Elizabeth and the Booker, then we can do a produce and then recruit and build. So producing, you can do player cards here during production, and they can add various amounts of money here. So like this adds $2, this one will add $0 or $1, and so you're going to produce any money that you want, and then you can do recruit and build. And this shows you basically the cost of that. So you've got structures here. The strongholds will cost you $6. The turrets 4, 3. And then you've got the leaders again with the stars, and this shows you the amount. And you can place these where you have any other units on the board there. So after you do that, then let's talk about the movement and combat. First, they're going to be able to move their units, and you can move up to 4 units. Now, normally, if we take a zoom in here, you can move across these different arrows here. So if the areas share these sort of haloed borders here, then you can just move them directly across. So you can move up to 4 units, and you can split them up, move them however you want. But if you want to move them across these zip line kind of ideas here, you move them across there, but it's a risky sort of movement. So what you're going to do is actually roll these movement dice, these skyline dice here, and all you really want to do is basically roll a thumbs up. So as long as you roll 1 thumbs up, then you're good. However, if you didn't, you have 2 options here. You add up all of the numbers, and then you have to discard that many cards. In this case, we only have to get rid of 1 card. Not a big deal. But it's feasible to, roll a whole bunch there, so you have to get rid of 3 cards. You wouldn't necessarily want to do that. Or you can just basically destroy the unit. He falls off into oblivion. So it's a little bit risky to move across some of these sort of shortcuts on the game. Now, after you move, you may or may not have combat. Now, that's most of the time you are going to have combat. It's a pretty combat-heavy game. So if you ever have units of yours that are in, another zone that has the enemy units, then you're going to have combat. And at the beginning of the game, you're going to have a bunch of these cards here face down. And then when you end up there, you're going to actually flip these over, and you can see the combat value here, and then the money reward that's going to be happening here. So these are sort of like, you know, AI units, or maybe you can kind of think of them as extensions of the other players. That's how I kind of thought of it. It's like, you know, these aren't really my units, but they could be anybody's units, and these are just sort of indicative of the Civil War and lots of the battles that are going on. So you can see here's a combat value there. So what you're going to do when you have combat is you're actually going to take, and the attacker's going to do this first, is they're going to take and they're going to set down a certain number of cards face down. Now if you're attacking one of these little tokens here, there's no defender, so there's no card play that's going to happen. But if we had two separate units, then the attacker would put some cards face down, and then the defender would go ahead and put some of their cards face down. And then you're going to reveal the cards, and you can see these cards here actually have some different effects. So this guy actually says a combat effect here, and it says, you know, before dice are rolled, you may select one random card the opponent played into this combat and discard it. That card has no effect. And then some of these other cards will have unlockable abilities here. It's like this one's unlockable, but this is a discard effect, so you can play this, you know, sort of as itself as an action on your turn. But a lot of these have combat effects, and so when you reveal them during combat, then you're going to be able to do the effect there. And so you're basically going to do the effects of all the cards and then add up all the combat strength. And then you're going to take a look at your little player reference sheet here. And if you see here, we've got basically three kinds of dice. Now remember I said the leaders have stars on the bottom, the special units are basically roll around circles, and then the common units have the squares. So you're going to look there and you're going to roll a die for each of those. And so we've got here the red die. This is what the leaders will be rolling. This actually gets up to 7 and 8. And then the lowest here I think is a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then, you know, this white die here could even roll a 0, gets up to a 4, and then the blue one's kind of in between. So the better units you have, you know, the better likelihood of doing a lot of damage. So you're going to add these value up to, you know, the value of the combat on the cards, plus maybe some extra value from some of the effects. And then basically the loser, the person who has the least amount, is going to have to destroy one of the structures, and you can only ever have one structure in territory. So if we were having combat here, I'd have to get rid of the structure and then destroy one unit, and then the rest of the units have to go back to where you have a stronghold, sort of a base. If you don't have a stronghold, then those units are just going to get wiped out, and you're not doing so great. And like I said before, if you defeat one of these territory tokens, then you get that much money. When you fight Booker here, he's actually just going to roll 3 red dice, so that can get pretty wild and crazy there. If you defeat him, he's just going to get removed from the board. He's going to come back on the board the next time when we draw one of our world event cards. And then if Elizabeth's on the board, you maybe control her, and there are some victory cards that have to do with controlling her. So that is, you know, sort of an objective of the players. After you've moved around, resolved any combat, then you can discard any cards and then draw back up to 5 cards. Now, let's talk about how these cards work and some of how to unlock the special abilities, and also we need to talk about the victory cards here. So on these player reference cards, not only do these act as a reference, but they also act as a way to keep track of the upgrades and different special abilities you've unlocked. Now, the way that you can actually perform an upgrade, there's 4 basic ways to do that. Very simply, the first way is winning a combat. That's very easy, especially at the start of the game where you're going to be fighting these little, you know, NPC tokens, if you will. Then you can also purchase an upgrade for $3, and you can do that again during the phase where you're doing the recruit and build. And then you can become the first player, and remember, a part of that is by voting and winning the vote, or at least playing the most influence on a vote, and then you get the first player token. And then you can claim a victory point card. So every round we're going to turn up one of these victory point cards here. And these are just going to kind of build up over the game. So like, you know, this one, your faction controls 4 territories. As long as you've got that during your turn at some point, you can take and hold this. And this is going to give you 3 victory points. You know, your faction controls 16 units on the board. These are going to be all kinds of different things. You destroy an enemy leader. So these are going to give you sort of little short-term or medium-term goals to try to achieve. In addition to controlling space on the board, you're going to want to do these. And then again, the first player who gets 10 points, or if we go all the way through the event deck, then whoever has the most points wins. But let's talk about these upgrades, because this is something you're going to want to be doing kind of early and often and trying to upgrade these. So whenever you do one of those 4 things, win a combat, get first player, whatever, you're going to get these little tokens here. And you can upgrade actually the actual sort of effectiveness of the card. So if on my handyman cards, if I wanted to give it, a little bit of bonus to combat or influence or the money that it generates, I can do an upgrade and just sort of, put the +1 there, and then I can upgrade it again there for the +2. Now, if you want to unlock one of the text ability of the cards here, so let's take a look at one of these here. So here's our sharpshooter, okay? And he's got bird's eye. He generates, a little bit of combat, not very much money. And then he has the bird's eye ability. He says, you may discard this card during your turn to do the following: destroy a common unit in any location you're adjacent. So this can be kind of handy. You can just play that and then blow away one of the little square base units. Well, to do that, you need to unlock the sharpshooter here. So we take there and unlock that, and now this ability is unlocked. We couldn't actually do that before. Now, if you ever have 3 more upgrades than your opponent, then you're not allowed to upgrade. So it kind of prevents you from running away with it. And it also kind of lets the other player sort of stall out and try to really consider when you're going to be upgrading. Because right now, let's say I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 upgrades. And if my opponent had only 1, he may not get another upgrade because he knows that maybe I'm going to flip this to a 2, or I'm going to be able to unlock another special ability. So that's kind of an interesting little cat and mouse that happens here. So that's pretty much the game. You're kind of going to be jumping around, trying to control areas, trying to definitely upgrade all of the cards and abilities that you can do to make yourself that much more effective. And you really got to keep in mind what some of the upcoming events are going to be here for Elizabeth and she's going to sort of make life difficult for you. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the overview. First of all, I was really surprised how much I enjoyed playing this game. Now, I played the video game Bioshock Infinite, and I did not really like it. I had some huge issues with how the story kind of evolved, and basically there were some exploits that I found early on, and maybe they fixed those or something, but basically like you could run ahead and it would like auto-save, and there was more than once that I definitely was like running and trying to, play cat and mouse with some of the NPCs, and I like tripped an autosave, and I was like, oh, okay, and then I reloaded it once and the guy was dead, or they were totally in different spots. Anyway, it's not a review of the video game, but I really did enjoy the first Bioshock game. That was a fascinating world of this sort of, I don't want to get too political, but it's like objectivist Ayn Rand ideas kind of like gone crazy with these, crazy like stims that you could get and shoot yourself up with all these virtual powers and stuff like that. So it was totally cool little world that they've invented there. And this is sort of an extension of that kind of thing, kind of blown up into, instead of an undersea city, now it's a, sort of a cloud city and things. I do like that you don't play the main characters. I thought that was kind of weird choice at first, but it's interesting because it kind of reminds me how the board game War of the Ring plays out, where you have sort of your 2 armies kind of fighting, and then you've got Frodo and the Ring guys kind of doing their little thing. Now that's in War of the Ring, it's controlled by a player, but I felt like that was the same here, but it was just kind of controlled by the game. And it is interesting to see those Elizabeth timelines, and you have to sort of plan for that. You go, okay, well, if I control Elizabeth here on this upcoming turn and we flip an event card that triggers her, then I'm going to be able to do a lot of damage. Or I can see that the other player would be able to do a lot of damage if they control her to me. So it becomes kind of this fight for her and things like that. So that kind of adds an interesting sort of sub-goal to the game. Instead of just like a strict, like Risk, like pure area domination game and that's it. You've got that little kind of subplot happening, and you've got the different victory cards that are coming up to give you short little term goals to grab. I mean, like one of them is you got to have, I think it's an alarm in 3 different areas. So you got to you want to save up some money to build those and get those out and things like that. So that's the one thing is definitely you want to manage your money, and I feel like that was handled in a correct way. It's like it feels real balanced in that sense that you really need to kind of manage your economy to be able to get the right units out and get the good units out and be able to accomplish some of those different victory conditions. The dice are getting a little bit nutty, like you got big swings on the dice with the combat, but to me that's okay. I mean, it kind of adds to the fun of the game. There's enough kind of going on and keeping the game sort of interesting, like I said, with Elizabeth and the victory conditions, and even the movement on the board is really kind of dynamic with the zip lines or the skylines. So that's kind of, it's interesting. I don't know, it's weird. I've never seen a sort of a war game like that with like, oh, here's your movement and your tactical board, and then, well, let's see if you actually can move across there. it's a pretty cool thing. But getting back to the dice, I've seen that be kind of really wild, but I don't mind it in this game because once you kind of get into the game and get into the idea of that I need to do these actions to upgrade my cards and be able to unlock the special abilities, do that quickly, the game does kind of move quickly. So, you know, having these wild dice swings isn't a huge deal because it's there for everybody, and you know, and it kind of adds the excitement. So I think it's really valid here. And so the components, I don't know if you could see with the board and everything, the board looks really cool. I like it. And even though those models are really small, I really like how they look. So Plaid Hat is definitely becoming a sort of a plastic company, because I mean the Mice and Mystics models are, and I think this is the same guy did it. Yeah, I just remember that the same guy did these that did the Mice and Mystics models. I think I could be. I'm totally forgetting now. I'm pretty sure it's the same guy. So yeah, so this is a really cool game, and I don't know, I can't recommend enough. I actually did not really like, you know, the first game that they did with this designer, City of Remnants. That was weird, because that game felt like really close to being a lot of fun and good, but it just was, wow, it was kind of wacky. But this one's really cool, and it might be because this is basically a two-player team game, so some of the elements of that being a multiplayer game I had an issue with. But the way that you use the cards and stuff like in this game actually kind of reminds me of City of Remnants, but I think because it's two-player and it really stretches your cards across, you know, the whole turn as far as voting, and then you need money because, like I said, money's tight, and then you kind of use them for combat. Not very many cards. I found you don't really use it a lot for the combat value. Now some of them you can use, and it's situational. Let's just call it that. But the abilities on the cards, those do come into play, and those are, you know, the combat abilities. So the fact that the cards are stretched across the whole turn makes it pretty interesting. So anyway, it's definitely a cool game, and I could see like a nice little expansion with this, with maybe some more Elizabeth timelines, you know, some other little elements, maybe some new units or something, and maybe some new cards and things. But anyway, definitely take a look at that. Definitely was surprised how much I enjoy this game. Really, really excellent, fun game. And even if you haven't played the video game, and I'm kind of going on and on with this, but I'm trying to sell it because I really, really did have fun with it. Even if you're not in the video game and stuff, it is an interesting sort of world that they put together with this Bioshock stuff. And it's just kind of interesting to be able to play the bad guys in that sense, because, like I said, I didn't care for the video game kind of as a piece of software per se, but I do find that world that the Bioshock folks have created to be very interesting. So it is kind of a strange sort of theme to kind of get yourself into in this case, you know, playing the bad guys with these sort of little rebel band of two people, you know, trying to screw you over. So all right, anyway, Bioshock Infinite, definitely take a look at it. Thanks.